Chris and I are thrilled, Senator, to have you join us today for this conversation about recovery and resilience. Thank you for coming and being a part of this day. You're a great friend of the Georgia Chamber. We appreciate you. I want to jump right into, I think, the question that probably our membership is most interested in. Talk a little bit about the CARES Act that you were so instrumental in getting over the finish line in June, and then where we are with respect to any future recovery efforts coming from Washington.
Well, thanks, Peter. I know you have a full-time job, and it's pretty difficult today, too, so I appreciate your leadership as chairman. And I've told Chris this, this is when the membership gets its return on its dues. Not that they don't normally, but in a crisis like this, you guys are doing a great job getting information out and helping your members figure out how to navigate through this. It's a very difficult time. Who would have ever believed that we'd shut the government down or the economy down because of this crisis? But we did. And I think it was proper that we did because of the threats, and we knew the protocols we had. The best defense we had against the virus was to distance ourselves, and that meant for most Americans to stay at home and shelter in place. Now, once we did that, we then knew that we had to do something to help small business because they just don't have a lot of reserve to get through the few months. At that point, this was back in March we were talking about this. We knew we had to do so. The CARES Act had several different phases to it. All in was about $2.9 trillion, of which only about $2 trillion now is at work in the economy. We still have a little over $1 trillion that has not been fully allocated yet. But the big success of that was the money that was directed and the energy was directed at small businesses, the Paycheck Protection Program. The chamber, the small community banks were the heroes of this thing. Really, they got in, and I think we started with 800 banks to start with in the SBA program, ended up with like 5 million. It's just incredible how many small banks stepped up and underwrote these loans. We saved about 1.5 million jobs in Georgia in that one program. Incredible. 1.5 million jobs. And those are real. And when I look at the loan size, the average loan of the PPP program was $103,000. These are the smallest companies in Georgia. And the average employment is 10. And so what we're looking at doing now, we still have about $130 billion left in that 660 allocation. And that 130 we want to reprogram to extend the benefit for a few more months. We just think this thing is dragging out longer than we anticipated. We're going to do that. That's pretty much been agreed to by both sides, I think. I talked to the White House this morning, and we had an update about where we are. There's progress in most areas except for two, and that is the state bailout, the state allocation, and then the $600 premium for unemployment. One side wants to extend that through December. We want to do something different to help incent people to get back to work.
Excellent. Are you optimistic, Senator?
I'm always optimistic, but I'm also a realist. I've been in Washington for 5 years. I know how dysfunctional it is. Right now, in the middle of a presidential year, I'm hopeful, but I'm not optimistic that we'll actually get a comprehensive deal done. Okay. And we need to. There's a compromise on the table. Right now, the president has actually used executive orders to provide extended relief for unemployment and yet give people an incentive to go back to work. It's not like we're not sensitive to the problem. We are very sensitive to the problem. $2.9 trillion is a huge allocation. That's more than we spend on our normal discretionary, but it's almost 3 times what we spend on our discretionary budget every year. So this is a big deal. We did not want a liquidity crisis to turn into an insolvency crisis because we knew that would destroy jobs. So the whole focus has been to protect jobs, to protect the relationship between the employer and the employee. We think the PPP program has been successful. We know that the Main Street program has really had a false start. It hasn't really gotten in gear yet. The underwriting is very difficult. And so we're working with the regulators on the ratios in the banks and all the things that could be slowing that down to see if we can speed that up.
Excellent. Thank you.
So, Senator, the CARES Act and these other programs, they help small business, they help our large companies, they help government. We've talked about that. You're the only voice in Washington, it seems like, for the last couple of months, talking about how we help our local school systems get their kids back. And I've got a 14-year-old that's going to start in a few days. And so, we're very interested. Can you tell us kind of a little bit more about your bill and what you're focused on here?
Well, thank you. I grew up in a household where my mom and dad were school teachers. Right. And so this is not a foreign language to me. But as a business guy, I look at this thing and say, well, if you're going to open up the economy and it starts to come back, we predicted it would be very bumpy, and it is going to be. But we knew there was a problem because you have so many two-income families where both parents, and in many single-parent households, it creates a problem that if the children aren't in school but the parents going back to work, that's a real issue.
Right.
Not only that, but we don't want our children to lose potentially 6 months or a year or longer of education progress, particularly the challenged children who are at risk. Those are the ones I'm really most concerned about. The third and fourth grade young person that may not be reading at grade level. They might get left behind here. I'm worried about people in communities that don't have equal access to broadband, to online learning. But I'm optimistic right now that we can get our schools open safely again in some form. I believe the best decision is made locally. My mother always preached that when I was a child, that between the parent, the teacher, the principal, the local administrators. So you've seen me, I've not been critical of anybody politically about whether they're open virtually or a hybrid or they're opening up 100%. That's their decision. What I wanted to do was put something before Congress that said, let's help them. I mean, there was really no help in there to coordinate this. So what we wanted to do, there's a grant in here, hoping to incorporate it in this next round of relief. I think it will be. It brings funding for PPE, for testing, for healthcare workers and so forth. It also gets a connection to the healthcare community. There are a lot of unemployed nurses right now because of the elective surgery decline when we shut the hospitals down for elective surgeries. We want a database of best practices. So somebody in Hayhira can look at somewhere in Texas and find a good practice and that would apply to their school. And then lastly, we want a database that's transparent. We want every parent to know, and teacher for that matter, to know what's going on in their local school. You know, how many infections, or do we have any problems, and that's so they can make a good decision.
Okay. And where are we in the process? I know you've dropped the bill.
We put
next?
the bill in. We have several co-sponsors. What we're really doing is incorporating it now into the next round of relief, where our proposal is about $105 billion for that, about 70 for K through 12 and another 30 for universities. I think that's going to be negotiated. The Democrats started with a lower number. They ended up at somewhere around 400. We're going to find a common ground in there. That, I believe, will get negotiated.
We might need to put some in there for college football, too, but that'll be another discussion for another day, I'm sure.
Senator, I'm going to change direction a little bit. You've been an outspoken critic with respect to unfair trade practices coming out of China. How serious of a threat is China to U.S. business?
Oh, wow. Well, it's not just U.S. business. It's to our way of life. You know, their leaders over there quote Confucius a lot. I used to live over there, and I've been a student of their culture for most of my career. And there are a couple of books out that talk about it right now. Michael Pillsbury wrote a book called The 100-Year Marathon. It shows how they're really trying over the next 50 years, by 2049, to become, the next 30 years, to become the leader of the world. In 1789, when the United States started this great experiment in democracy, the largest economy in the world was China. And they want to get back to that position. So their leaders quote Confucius all the time. And there's a saying that just as there can't be two suns in the sky, there can't be two emperors on the earth. And the word they use for emperor is hegemon. The meaning is they want to be the rule maker like they were for 4,000 years. They call themselves the Middle Kingdom. They believe they're above the rest of us, just between us and heaven. And that's not just a colloquial saying. What they've been doing over the last few decades is stealing our technology, forcing the transfer of our technology, not giving us equal access, conducting a cyber war, and not complying with the WTO. We helped them get into the World Trade Organization. They've been violating it ever since. Why? Because it gives them a distinct advantage in terms of competing. They have the second largest economy in the world. They're about to have the largest economy in the world. But what they're doing is bullying people around the world. When we backed up over the last decade in terms of foreign policy engagement, we opened the door for China to do what they're doing now, and that's expanding radically around the world. We see what they're doing in 36 ports in Africa and 52 ports in South America, where they've made these proprietary loans. They can come in at any time and foreclose on a weak partner and then have a naval base. They've done it in Colombo and Karachi just in the last few years. We see their Belt Road Initiative. They put $1 trillion recently in that. They've also done something that really shocked me when they did it. In 2013, when they saw America backing up politically from their foreign engagements in foreign policy, China stepped up and wrote this Made in China 2025. It was authoritarian, and it basically said, we're going to dominate 12 areas of technology, and here's how we're going to do it. Well, the Chinese culture never tells you what they're going to do unless and until they've decided that you either don't have the wherewithal or the will to stop them. They misinterpreted the last administration. President Trump comes in and said, enough. We want equal access. We want to stop the cyber war. We want you to stop stealing our technology, and we want you to start complying with the WTO. I was over there over Labor Day and actually was part of going from a grand bargain idea to an incremental way of getting a trade process started, and we actually got a deal done. And some $40–50 billion of agriculture access that will really help Georgia. Now, and that's not why we did it, but they are the beneficiary of the first step. We're hoping to continue that. COVID-19 changes the calculus dramatically. China has to answer some questions in terms of why what happened in the first few weeks of this thing. You know, in the airline industry, they shut down travel inside their own country, but they allowed international flight to continue. That doesn't make any sense to me. So this is a long-term pull with China. We need to do one thing, and that is strengthen our position with our allies. Because if you look at the GDP of all of our allies out here who believe in self-determination, it's over $75 trillion. If you look at all the self-determinant countries who could align with China, that's Russia, China, Cuba, Venezuela, it's about 20 trillion. I mean, therein lies the reality of where the world is if we step up and lead.
Quickly, what role does Fort Gordon and our other military bases here in Georgia play in our response to China, Senator?
Well, first of all, I was just in Augusta last night, as a matter of fact, and Augusta's on fire right now, not because just of the base there, Fort Gordon, but just the great leadership and the economy down there is doing very well. Fort Gordon now is the Army's headquarters of their cyber command. This is a big deal. The talent down there, we have an NSA, not many people know, we have one of the top 3 NSA installations in the world right there in Augusta, Georgia. This is extremely important for the national defense. Saxby Chambliss was one of the great early heroes of starting the emphasis on cyber in Augusta. Governor Deal put $50 million in a training center down there. So we've had state and local as well as federal help to make Fort Gordon a leader in this. Why is it important? Well, we saw the Equifax problem just a couple years ago where an individual company was attacked by a state actor. That's not an equal fight. Well, now we're integrating that in a way that makes us stronger and more capable in terms of deterring, and that's what we're trying to do, to deter nefarious activities in cyberspace. Look, the world's more dangerous than it's been in my lifetime right now. It used to be just air, land, and sea were the domains. Right? Well, now it's air, land, and sea, cyber, and space. And so this is a real challenge to America as we look at our resources and how we allocate resources, what we do with our military, and that sort of thing. The next thing then is, the players change. It was a mano a mano thing for 50 years with the Soviet Union, the Communist Party. Well, today you have China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and terrorism has not gone away. And so it's a very complicated matrix we're trying to deal with. Cyber and Georgia are right in the middle of that. Robins Air Force Base is the new center for the Advanced Battle Management System, which is the new direction of the military. All branches are headed. I'm just so proud of the people who work there and support it, and because they would never have chosen Fort Gordon if we didn't have the talent and the capability to do that.
No question.
Yeah.
No question.
And we have a pretty good airline here located headquartered in Atlanta, too.
Thank you, Senator. We appreciate
and a great
that,
airport
too.
and a great port. So, I mean, all of that kind of fits into their calculus.
No, I think the infrastructure in Georgia is without peer, which we're grateful for. Yeah. Changing gears a little bit again, you've been one of the real leaders around immigration reform and real immigration reform. Could you give an update to our membership about just where you are with respect to those efforts? Yeah,
I mean, I'm a business guy, but I've lived outside the country. I've been an immigrant, in other countries, and it's a double-faceted issue. It really is. Number one, we want to protect the sanctity of our borders. That's just what civilized countries do. We want to do that. We also want to bring in quality people. This country was built on immigration. Absolutely. And there's just no question about it. So there's a great misunderstanding when you want to confusion around when you want to protect the sanctity and integrity of a border doesn't mean you want to shut down immigration. To grow this economy at 3%, all the economists tell you have to have a healthy immigration system that's at least 1 million plus. We bring in 1.1 million legal immigrants a year. The problem is, back in 1965, we went away from what was basically a merit-based immigration system to basically a family-based immigration system, which means that if I come in, I can bring my cousin, my uncle, my aunt, my grandparents, and so forth. And so today, we don't bring in but about 70,000 people a year out of the 1.1 million that are actually going to work. And that's a problem. I put in a merit-based immigration system with Senator Cotton. President Trump endorsed it a few years ago. We didn't get any Democrat play in that, but we're still working that issue. President Trump offered a pathway to citizenship for all the DACA recipients, 1.8 million, to take it off the table, and we couldn't get the Democrats to agree to us, with us on that. So I think that the way forward is the merit-based immigration system that can add enough quality workers into our economies that we can sustain and supplement our own organic growth in our workforce. Why is that important? Because what happens is in mature societies mature like America right now, we're aging, we need to supplement in order to grow at 3%. You can add people who are qualified from other countries. I have a bill right now called the Healthcare Workforce Supplemental Act that basically we're trying to go back and use unused visas over the last few years to allow doctors and nurses to come in to our rural hospitals primarily to help the shortfall. We have a tremendous shortage of doctors and nurses right now, and the COVID-19 crisis just accentuated that shortage. So this is about protecting our compensation for our workforce, but it's also in building our diversity and our capability. America until 1965, if you got a college degree in the United States, you got an automatic citizenship. Well, that got changed in the Great Society. And so today, we're trying to get back to more of that merit-based immigration that actually created this economic miracle in the first place, partly.
Thank you.
Senator, I think that's a great lead in to kind of the next part of our program, too. When you talk about immigration, the world is going through COVID right now, but we're also going through some significant social change. And we're having a lot of discussion around what equality really looks like. And I know we all miss John Lewis and had an incredible impact on our state. You've worked a lot with David Scott on how we support our HBCUs, and then we've also got a special guest today that you're bringing to us, your good friend Tim Scott. So can you talk a little bit about your work there and maybe set up our conversation with Senator Scott?
Oh yeah, the people that dial in are going to really enjoy Tim Scott in a minute. He's a class act. We're going through a very difficult time, but this isn't the first day of that difficult time. Throughout my lifetime, we've been there. My father was very involved in one of the early immigration or desegregation issues and integrated the school system in Houston County early in the process. This has been part of my life early. One of my first jobs was that Head Start program. This is very personal to me. We've got more things that we agree on in this country than we disagree on. What we need to find are a peaceful way to get there. And I think what most people are concerned with right now is they want the law to be enforced, they want safety, but we also need to have confidence that our police forces are one of us, that this is, they're serving us and that sort of thing. And so we need to work on that. And I know David Scott very well. I knew John Lewis very well, and I have so much respect for what Congressman Lewis accomplished in his lifetime. I mean, he stood for integrity and courage. He was a beacon of encouragement up there. And there's one word that you'll hear Tim Scott talk about later, and that's hope. And I think that what we have right now is an opportunity more than a problem. And that opportunity, if we get away from the politics of it and start talking about how we solve some of these problems, it's amazing how much we have in common. We lost a dear friend of mine recently, Herman Cain. Yep. And Herman Cain called me his brother from another mother, and he meant it. And that means so many things to so many, it means so many things to me in different ways. And what we have to do here is to find commonality and provide hope for each other and to find a way to be a little more tolerant of each other. And so when you come back, one of the things that I remember Congressman Lewis John talking about was our police forces need to reflect the communities in which they serve, And yeah, I think we need some de-escalation training and we need a better database. So there's some things in there that we are recommending from a legislative point of view. You're going to hear Tim talk about the Justice Act later. But behind what we've just done in terms of HBCUs and opportunity zones, which a lot of your members should be taking advantage of, right, in addition to the criminal justice reform that we've just accomplished under President Trump the last couple of years, have really made a big impact on these communities, and yet we still have a long way to go.
Right. Well, thank you for that work. We appreciate that. I think that's some good advice for us all to take in, to de-escalate this and to talk about where the opportunities are. But we also appreciate your leadership on recovery, on resiliency, on China, and all these other issues that you're on every day. I think this is a great opportunity for us to switch gears now. Let's go to that conversation with you and Senator Scott. So,
Absolutely.
Senator
I'm looking
Perdue,
forward
thank
to it.
you.
Thank you very much,
Yes,
Chris.
sir.
Stay safe.
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, thank you.